Consider the following photos and captions from the Messenger, a Watchtower convention report of July 25th, 1931, describing a large conventions held that year in major European cities. The captions shown underneath the original captions found in the Messenger. Compare them with the caption the writer or writers of the Society's history book placed beneath that book's photo of J.F. Rutherford, shown here to the right, claiming the witnesses knew that he was not their leader. The first photo in the Messenger of 1931 convention is Paris, and its caption underneath describes Rutherford explicitly as their visible leader. So, in upper right here, picture of Rutherford. It says J.F. Rutherford in 1941. The witnesses knew that he was not their leader. Then down below it says International European Conventions planned by Brother Rutherford for the convenience of our brethren across the Atlantic who could not come to Columbus. Their visible leader! About to give instructions to the Paris division of Une Grande Armée. Une Grande Armée! The Grand Army! So, note that caption. Une Grande Armée! Their visible... Oh, I'm sorry. Their visible leader? This is from the Proclaimer's book. Rutherford is... They knew that he was not their leader. So yeah. So they're lying. And the next two from London and from Magdeburg, Germany, the captions refer to Rutherford as the chief. The Bethel family at London see him grinning. The chief had just finished telling them something in the colored language. Alright. The chief inspects the cleaning of kop salat just gathering from the garden that takes only 4 bushels for a meal. President of Watchtower Babylon Craft Society and Generalissimo of the convention. The fourth designates him as Generalissimo of the convention. This convention report was printed 10 years before Rutherford's 1941 statement quoted in the Watchtower's new history book. So the history book lied about history. Specifically said that he wasn't claiming to be their leader, he wasn't a leader. We were Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't have a leader. Catholics would say their leader is the Pope. We don't have leaders. When Judge Rutherford died on January 8, 1942, Nathan H. Knorr was unanimously elected president by the board of directors. The organizational structure continued basically the same, though with some adjustments, as Knorr did field out some responsibility. Circumstances actually made this necessary, for the number of witnesses grew from only 108,000 at the time of Rutherford's death to more than 2 million during Knorr's presidency. Not a writer nor particularly a student of Scripture, Knorr relied on Fred Franz, the vice president, as more or less final arbiter in scriptural matters and principal writer of the organization. Questions such as those that discussed at governing body sessions related early in this chapter were, for decades, submitted to Fred Franz for decision. If President Knorr felt that the decision might have some critical effect on the society's operation in certain countries of the world, he would certainly discuss it personally with Fred Franz and would not hesitate to make known what he felt the circumstances made advisable in a pragmatic way, overruling the vice president if necessary. As has been noted earlier, this basic relationship continued up to the 1970s as illustrated in the decision to return to having bodies of elders in the congregations. That particular decision hinged largely upon the view and opinion of one person, the vice president. And when he changed his mind and favored the return of body of elders, the president acceded. This whole part is about, like, explaining that this concept of a governing body is a very recent thing. It's not the way the organizations are been run since its beginning. So if Jesus decided to have a governing body in his perfect organization in 1818, he fucked up. The same was basically the case with all published material. The president selected main articles for the Watchtower from material submitted by various writers, then he passed these on to the writing department for proofreading and any necessary editing or polishing. Then these were finally read by the vice president and president, if approved, were published. Carl Adams, who was in charge of the writing department when I entered it in 1965, explained to me that the president by then had given the department considerable latitude as to the reworking of such material. He pointed out one exception, namely, any material written by the vice president, stating that what comes from Brother Franz is to be viewed as ready for publication with no adjustments to be made. Here again, nonetheless, the President himself could overrule. As an example, in 1967, President Norris sent to Carl Adams, Ed Dunlop, and myself copies of questions from readers that Fred Franz had prepared and turned in for publication. Just the year before the book had been published, authorized by Fred Franz, in which he pointed out that the year 1975 would mark the end of 6,000 years of human history. 1975? 6,000 years since creation. Likening those 6,000 years to 6 days of 1,000 years each, he had written, in not many years within our own generation, we are reaching what Jehovah God could view as the seventh day of man's existence. Oh my God, the witnesses sound like Seventh-day Adventists here. Do you sound like Seventh-day Adventists? Seventh-day Adventists? No, Seventh-day Adventists are full of shit. We had nothing to do with them. They're full of shit. They're crazy. We're God's one true organization. We have nothing to do with Seventh-day Adventism. Could view as the seventh day of man's existence. How appropriate it would be for Jehovah God to make of this coming seventh period of 1,000 years a Sabbath period of rest and release, a great Jubilee Sabbath for the claiming of liberty throughout the earth and to all its inhabitants. I kept on pointing out, before UMG started fucking with me, the party, Grand Jubilee when the slaves must be released. Very popular theme in art. This would be most timely for mankind. It would also be most fitting on God's part, for remember, mankind is yet ahead of it, what the last book of the Holy Book speaks of as the reign of Jesus Christ over earth for 1,000 years. The millennial reign of Christ, now on the seventh day. We don't have anything to do with the Seventh-day Adventists. That's crazy. That would be crazy. Prophetically, Jesus Christ, when on earth 19 centuries ago, said concerning himself, "For Lord of the Sabbath is what the Son of Man is." It would not be by mere chance or accident, but would be according to the loving purpose Jehovah God for the reign of Jesus Christ, the Lord of the Sabbath, to run parallel with the seventh millennium of man's existence. So he's saying what Jesus ought to do. Not for many decades had there been such a sense of excitement among Jehovah's Witnesses as these statements generate. Now we're in the 1975 thing. We never claimed that 1975 was the end of the world. We never claimed that. We never did. We never did. We never did. A tremendous surge of expectation developed, far surpassing the feeling at the end's nearness that I and others experienced in the early 1940s. That is why we were amazed to see the question from readers Fred Franz had worked up now argued that the end of the 6,000 years would actually come 1 year earlier than it had been published in the new book. Namely, it would come in 1974 instead of 1975. Super soon! Even a year super sooner than we said. As Noor and Carl Adams, when he received this material, he went to Fred Franz and asked why the sudden change. Franz replied with definiteness. This is the way it is. It's 1974. Noor did not feel at ease with the change, and that is why he sent the 3 copies with his request that we submit our individual observations. The Vice President's argumentation was built almost entirely upon the use of cardinal and an ordinal number in the account of the flood of Genesis, chapter 7, verses 6 and 11, 600 years and the 600th year. The argument endeavored to show that the count of time set out in the new book was off 1 year as to the time of the flood, and that 1 more year needed to be added, with the result that the end of 6,000 years would come to 1 year earlier in 1974 instead of 1975. So he was able to discern a 1 year's difference, arguing that Armageddon's sooner. Each of the 3 of us respectfully wrote that we did not think the material should be published, and that would be an extremely unsettling effect on the brothers. The President eventually agreed, since the material prepared by the Vice President was never published, and this was quite a rare occurrence. So no, we're sticking to the safe answer, which is that Armageddon comes exactly in 1975, 1974. It was during Noor's presidency the term governing body first began to be used with a measure of frequency. The literature now began to tie such a body with the board of directors of the Watchtower Society. In the Society's book, Qualified to be Ministers, published in 1955, page 381, the statement appears: during the years since the Lord came to his temple, and the visible governing body have been closely identified with the board of directors of this corporation. They called themselves a corporation. Thus, the 7 members of the board of directors were considered to be the 7 members of the governing body. The fact is, however, their situation was much as had been the case with the directors in Russell's and Rutherford's day, which is that they didn't have any power. Most of its existence, the organization was run by one guy. Marley Cole, a witness who wrote a book with the full cooperation of the society entitled Jehovah's Witnesses, the New World Society, points out, in a section headed Internal Rebellion, he first describes a controversy in 1917 between Rutherford and the board, saying, 4 directors wanted a reorganization. As things stood, the president was the administration. He was not consulting them. He was letting them know what he was doing only after it was done. He was putting them in a position of advisors on legal corporate matters. Rutherford made no bones about going ahead. The pastor before him had worked that way. The pastor made decisions. The pastor issued administrative orders without the board's prior sanction. Then in a footnote, Cole states that the president of the society thereafter continued to exercise such unrestricted freedom may be seen by the following accounts of N.H. Knorr's actions in relation to bringing forth a new Bible translation. The Watchtower of September 15, 1950, page 315 and 316, is then quoted. It reveals the directors of the board were first informed by the president of the existence of the New World Translation, probably one of the biggest projects ever engaged in by the organization. Only after the translation, the Greek scripture portion had already been completed and was ready for printing. Right up to 1971, when the tail wagging the dog talk was given, the board of directors did not meet on any regular schedule. It was only as the president decided to convene them. Sometimes months went by without any meetings, with the most frequent agenda evidently being such corporate matters as the purchase of property or of new equipment. As a rule, they had nothing to say about what scriptural material would be published, nor was their approval sought. So the governing body had absolutely nothing to do with creating doctrine for the organization. Vice President Franz made this clear when testifying before a court in Scotland in 1954 in a case known as the Walsh case. Questioned as to what was done if some major change in doctrine was made and whether such had to be first approved by the board of directors, the Vice President replied, the material here being reprinted from the official court transcripts with Q representing the question of the counselor and A, the response given by Fray Franz. Question. In matters spiritual, has each member of the board of directors equally valid voice? Answer. The president is the mouthpiece. He pronounces the speeches that show advancement of the understanding of the scriptures. Then he may appoint other members of the headquarters temporarily to give other speeches that set forth any part of the Bible upon which further light has been thrown. Question. Tell me, are these advances, as you put it, voted upon by the directors? Answer. No. Question. How do they become pronouncements? Answer. They go through editorial committee. I give my okay after scriptural examination. Then I pass them on to President Knorr, and President Knorr has the final okay. Question. Does it not go before the board of directors at all? Answer. No. I personally knew that the presentation of matters to be true as regards to the board of directors. Before 1971, I was in a meeting with several writing staff members called by Carl Adams, and the question arose as to how to get a president's approval of certain proposed improvements in the Watchtower magazine. Someone suggested that Lyman Swingle, who was present as one of the writers, broached the matter to Knorr. Swingle's reply was brief but spoke volumes as to the reality of the situation. He said, "Why me? What can I do? I'm only a director." Not only do the statements of the Vice President of the Scotland trial bear on the issue of the existence of genuine governing body at the time, they also show how fictitious the claim is that spiritual food provided proceeds from a faithful and discreet slave class. It's a fictitious claim. That's not the way it works. 2 or at best 3 men determined what information would appear in the Watchtower magazine and other publications. Nathan Knorr, Fred Franz, and Carl Adams. The last of these was not of the so-called anointed class. And by him not being a member of the so-called anointed class, that means he wasn't claiming, he didn't spontaneously decide that he was. The other ones did, so they're different. They're extra crazy. As the Vice President's statement clearly shows, not even the members of the board of directors, all supposedly members of the faithful and discreet slave class, were invited to express approval of the spiritual food to be presented. They don't even have an up or down vote. Thus, even as Russell, up until the year 1916, exercised full and unique control over what was published by the Watchtower Society, and just as Rutherford did so through the presidency until 1942, and similarly during Knorr's presidency, the exercise of authority was as to the preparation and serving of the spiritual food for the witnesses community was limited to 2 or 3 men, not something carried out by a class of persons supposedly assigned by Christ to be over all his belongings. Page 76.